Let's rewind the clock for a second. 16,000 years ago, North America was this vast, completely untouched landscape. Towering mountains, pristine lakes, massive, dense forests. Fast forward to today, and it's the bustling, incredibly modern United States, home to over 300 million people. Now that is an absolutely massive jump in history, right? Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to explore exactly how that unbelievable transformation actually happened. So the big question we're tackling today is simply this. How did this empty land become the USA? How did it grow so fast? And honestly, what kind of country has it really become? It's this fascinating, sometimes messy story full of human migration, intense struggles, some brilliant innovations, and yes, some pretty deep contradictions too. And the modern result of all that history? It's a complex demographic mosaic. Right now, looking at the 50 states, you've got a nation that is incredibly diverse. We're talking 67% white, 13% Hispanic, 13% Black, 4% Asian, and 1% Native American. This is literally a country built by people bringing entirely different languages and ideas to the table. I mean, millions of people there speak Spanish as their very first language alongside English. To really wrap our heads around how this dynamic mosaic came to be, we're going to break centuries of complex history down into 5 quick parts: the birth of the United States, expansion and deep divisions, the fight for equal rights, how the government works, and finally, the American cultural landscape. Let's dive right in. Part 1. The birth of the United States. From early settlements right up to independence. Okay, so picture the 1600s. You have these European settlers arriving on an unfamiliar, totally harsh continent. Some looking for religious freedom, like the pilgrims on the Mayflower in 1620. Others just looking for fortune. But jump ahead to the 1770s and colonial frustration over British taxation, it officially reached a boiling point. Things like the famous Boston Tea Party sparked a full-on revolution, culminating in Thomas Jefferson's 1776 Declaration of Independence. And by 1781, George Washington had successfully led the Americans to win their independence. Which brings us to Part 2, expansion and deep divisions. Essentially, the country's growing pains and the Civil War. So as a young country, the USA exploded in size, practically doubling overnight with things like the Louisiana Purchase. But growing that fast brought some incredibly intense internal fractures. By the mid-19th century, you basically had 2 totally incompatible systems trying to share one nation. Up north, you had an industrializing economy that was increasingly anti-slavery. Down south, you had an agrarian economy, think giant cotton fields, built entirely on pro-slavery laws. These irreconcilable differences over human rights and state independence, they ultimately ignited the devastating Civil War in 1861. And the human cost of that war was just staggering, well over 600,000 lives lost. But out of that unimaginable tragedy came this truly defining moment for the American ethos. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln stood at the site of a bloody battle in Pennsylvania and delivered the Gettysburg Address. He permanently defined the nation's democratic ideal as a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Now, the North victory did preserve the Union, but it left some deep, deep scars. That leads perfectly into Part 3, the fight for equal rights, the long struggle for true equality. Because even though they were a unified nation again, the internal battle for actual everyday equality was really just beginning. And it took so many forms. It was fought by heroes like Harriet Tubman, who escaped in 1849 and risked her life on the Underground Railroad. It was shaped by the millions of European immigrants coming through Ellis Island, seeking a better life while the U.S. kept an open door into the 1920s. And it was reignited by everyday citizens, like Rosa Parks in 1955, whose simple refusal to give up her bus seat sparked a massive movement that finally led to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. At the absolute center of that civil rights movement was, of course, Martin Luther King Jr. In August 1963, standing in front of 200,000 people in Washington, he delivered his legendary "I Have a Dream" speech. His peaceful, powerful fight against segregation brought monumental changes to American civil rights and laid the moral foundation for modern American society. All right, let's shift gears to Part 4, how the government works across all 50 states. So how do you actually manage a population this massive? Well, the U.S. relies on a very strict system of checks and balances. It was designed specifically so that no single person, not even the president, has total power. It's this intricate dance between 3 equal branches. You have Congress, who actually makes the laws, you have the president, who is the chief executive and head of the military, and then you have the Supreme Court, who decides what those laws mean and can even strike them down.
And driving that entire machine are two main political parties operating on very distinct philosophies. Generally speaking, Republicans advocate for lower taxes, self-reliance, and less government intervention. On the flip side, Democrats generally argue that the government has a duty to provide social services and help the vulnerable, which means higher taxes are necessary. That constant push and pull between those two viewpoints, that is what shapes American law every single day.
Which brings us to our final chapter, Part 5, the American cultural landscape. Let's talk food, music, and daily life. So what is it actually like to live there today? Well, the number 40 gives us a great snapshot. A standard work week is 40 hours. For a lot of folks, sure. But outside of work, Americans embrace this incredibly fast-paced, highly mobile lifestyle. People love their big SUVs, they rely heavily on fast food drive-thrus, and they shop at 24-hour supermarkets. Convenience and speed are just baked right into the daily routine.
And when they aren't working or driving, Americans consume media on a scale that is honestly hard to fathom. Get this, there are over 10,000 TV stations in the USA alone. From massive Hollywood blockbusters to 24-hour news, American entertainment is this giant global export that heavily influences how the rest of the world sees the country.
But you know, arguably their greatest cultural export is the music. It is a direct reflection of all the history we just talked about. Think about it. The blues born in the deep South along the Mississippi. Jazz emerging from the cultural melting pot of New Orleans. Motown soul booming straight out of Detroit's auto factories. And rap giving this fast-paced voice to the streets of New York. The historical movement of all those different people literally fueled the explosion of modern global music.
And all of this human drama, the history, the politics, the culture, it all plays out against an absolutely breathtaking natural geography. The landscape is just as extreme as the history. You can travel from the cool, wet climate of Northern California to stand under 115-meter-tall redwood trees, all the way to Arizona to look down into the scorching 1,600-meter-deep Grand Canyon. It is a stunning backdrop to the whole American story.
So there you have it. We've traced this incredible journey from a vast, empty land 16,000 years ago right up to the modern home of Starbucks, Apple computers, and a diverse population of 300 million people. This American mosaic is constantly evolving, shaped by its immigrants, its deep divisions, and its endless pursuit of equality. So considering everything we've unpacked today, what do you think the next chapter of the American story will look like?